She woke up from coma and discovered her husband had taken everything, but her next move shocked all. Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. The sterile smell of disinfectant filled Laura's nostrils as her eyelids fluttered open, the dim hospital room coming into focus. Her body felt foreign, weak, as if she'd been trapped in an endless nightmare. Blinking away the fog, she realized she wasn't dreaming, she was alive. A nurse's cheerful voice pierced the silence. "You're awake." "We were starting to lose hope," the nurse said, her relief genuine. Laura tried to speak, but her throat burned like sandpaper. "You've been in a coma for 6 months," the nurse continued gently, her tone tinged with hesitation. "Take it slow. There's a lot to catch up on." 6 months. Laura's heart raced. Flashes of her last memory, the screech of tires, the sharp pain in her chest, came rushing back. She had been in a car accident. But where was Aaron, her husband? Panic clawed at her chest. He had promised to be by her side forever. After hours of examinations and cautious conversation, the doctor explained Laura's long road to recovery. But something gnawed at her, a hollow absence. There were no flowers, no cards, no signs of Aaron. Her husband, who once couldn't bear to leave her alone for a single day, hadn't visited. "Can you call my husband?" she croaked finally, her voice barely a whisper. The nurse hesitated, looking away. "I'll check." The silence that followed was deafening. The next day, Laura's sister, Emily, arrived. Her face strained with an expression Laura had never seen before, guilt mixed with pity. Laura clung to Emily's hand, desperate for answers. "Where's Aaron?" she asked, her voice trembling. Emily's hesitation stretched unbearably long. He's moved on, Laura," Emily finally said, her words like knives. "He thought you weren't going to wake up." Laura's head spun as Emily revealed the betrayal. Aaron had drained their shared accounts, sold their home, and was now living with Bethany, his co-worker. Worse, he had spun the narrative that Laura's condition was hopeless, using it as an excuse to take everything they had built together. "I tried to fight him," Emily said, tears streaming down her face. "But legally, there wasn't much I could do. He had power of attorney." Laura's chest tightened, not from her injuries but from the unbearable weight of betrayal. The man she had loved, trusted, and built a life with had abandoned her when she was at her most vulnerable. As Laura grappled with the shocking revelation, her hospital door opened, revealing someone she hadn't expected. Margaret, her mother-in-law. Margaret's once commanding presence was now softened by age and grief. She clutched a small bouquet of flowers, her expression unreadable. "Laura," Margaret said, her voice steady but tinged with regret. "May I sit?" Laura's emotions were raw, and seeing Margaret stirred a complex mix of anger and sadness. But she nodded. Margaret sat down, her hands trembling slightly. "I don't know where to begin. What Aaron did to you, it's unforgivable. I can't excuse his actions, but I can help you fix this." Laura was stunned. Margaret had always been fiercely loyal to her son, sometimes to a fault. Her sudden shift in allegiance felt surreal. Margaret pulled out a folder from her bag and placed it on Laura's lap. "Aaron may think he's won, but he doesn't know I've been keeping my own secrets." Inside the folder were bank statements, property deeds, and detailed records of Aaron's financial manipulations. Margaret had kept meticulous documentation of his deceit, suspecting he might betray Laura long before the accident. "I wanted to believe he'd change," Margaret admitted, tears welling in her eyes. "But he's gone too far this time. And he'll pay for it." In the days that followed, Laura and Margaret formed an unlikely alliance. Margaret revealed that she had been quietly keeping tabs on Aaron's activities, suspecting his affair with Bethany long before the betrayal came to light. Using her resources and connections, Margaret provided Laura with the means to begin reclaiming her life. Bethany's name is on none of the assets, Margaret explained. Aaron thinks he's untouchable, but everything he's taken is still within reach. We just need to move carefully. Laura, though physically weak, felt a fire reigniting within her. The betrayal had shattered her, but Margaret's unexpected support gave her the strength to fight back. Slowly, she began piecing together the fragments of her life, determined to reclaim what was hers. Laura's days were a blur of small victories and overwhelming fatigue. Every moment spent going through the documents Margaret had given her was another step toward reclaiming her life. She was astonished by the sheer audacity of Aaron's actions. His lies, the accounts he had emptied, the assets he had sold without a second thought. Margaret's meticulous records became her lifeline. Together, they began to devise a strategy that would not only expose Aaron but leave him with no avenue of escape. Margaret, ever composed, handled the legal maneuvers. Her connections to some of the city's top attorneys proved invaluable, as she carefully selected the best team to represent Laura. But Laura wasn't content to sit idly by. She insisted on being involved, even as her recovery progressed slowly. It wasn't just about the money or the possessions. It was about reclaiming her dignity and confronting the man who had betrayed her when she needed him most. One night, while poring over files, Margaret paused, her hands resting on a thick stack of papers. "Laura, there's something you should know. Something I wasn't sure I should tell you." Laura looked up, her heart racing. "What is it?" Margaret hesitated, then took a deep breath. "Bethany. She's not just his co-worker. She's the one who pushed him to take everything from you. Aaron may have betrayed you, but she was the mastermind. She convinced him you wouldn't survive, that it was time for him to move on, and she wanted your life." Laura's hands trembled as she processed the revelation. Bethany wasn't just an accomplice. She was the architect of her suffering. The thought of confronting her filled Laura with a newfound resolve. As they prepared their case, Margaret suggested a bold move. "There's a gala Aaron is hosting next week," she said. "It's a celebration of his new ventures. He's parading around as if nothing happened. I think it's time we remind him who he's dealing with." The idea sent a jolt of both fear and exhilaration through Laura. Showing up at the gala would be a public declaration that she was no longer a victim. Margaret arranged everything, from Laura's transportation to the perfect dress that would make her presence unforgettable. The day of the gala, Laura stood before the mirror, her reflection a reminder of how far she had come. Though her body still bore the scars of her accident, her eyes burned with determination. When Laura entered the grand ballroom, all eyes turned to her. The soft hum of conversation halted, replaced by murmurs of disbelief. Aaron, standing near the stage with Bethany by his side, froze mid-sentence. His face turned ashen as Laura made her way across the room, every step measured and deliberate. "Laura," he stammered, recovering just enough to put on a facade of concern. You're here." "Yes, Aaron," Laura said, her voice steady. Surprised. Bethany clutched his arm, her eyes narrowing. "This isn't the time or place, Laura," she hissed, trying to maintain control of the situation. Laura's lips curled into a faint smile. "Oh, I think it's the perfect time and place." Before either of them could respond, Margaret stepped forward, her commanding presence silencing any rebuttal. She handed Aaron an envelope, her expression unreadable. "You might want to read this," she said coolly. Aaron hesitated, but the murmurs growing around him forced him to comply. He opened the envelope, his hands trembling as he scanned the contents. His face twisted in confusion, then panic. The documents detailed every fraudulent transaction he had made, every stolen asset, and every lie he had told to gain control of Laura's estate. Bethany, glancing over his shoulder, paled. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice rising. This can't be real." "Oh, it's very real," Margaret said, her tone sharp. "And I suggest you both prepare yourselves for what's coming." Aaron's attempt to maintain composure crumbled as Margaret's words sank in. He knew he had underestimated both his mother and Laura, believing they were too weak or too naive to fight back. Now, standing in the glaring spotlight of public scrutiny, he realized the extent of his miscalculation. Laura took a step closer, her voice low but filled with steel. "You left me for dead, Aaron. You took everything we built together and threw it away. But now I'm taking it all back." The crowd, initially stunned into silence, began murmuring in agreement. The whispers of admiration for Laura's courage and disdain for Aaron and Bethany grew louder. Aaron, desperate to salvage the situation, tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. The weight of his betrayal, now exposed for all to see, was too much to bear. Bethany, realizing the tide had turned, distanced herself from Aaron, her expression shifting to one of feigned innocence. "I had no idea," she said, her voice trembling. "Aaron told me everything was above board." Laura's gaze locked onto hers. "Spare me the act, Bethany. You orchestrated this just as much as he did. And trust me, your name isn't going to look good in the headlines tomorrow." Bethany opened her mouth to protest but quickly closed it, her confidence evaporating. Laura's composure and the undeniable evidence left her with no ground to stand on. As security escorted Aaron and Bethany from the event, Margaret placed a hand on Laura's shoulder. "You've won the first battle," she said softly. "But there's still more to do." Laura nodded, feeling the weight of what lay ahead. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time since waking up, she felt like herself again. Strong, determined, and ready to face whatever came next. The fallout from the gala was swift and brutal for Aaron and Bethany. By the next morning, headlines splashed across every major outlet detailed their betrayal, fraud, and public humiliation. The photos of Laura standing tall, a picture of grace and determination, became a symbol of resilience. Sympathy for her poured in from every corner, while Aaron and Bethany found themselves the targets of public outrage. Aaron, desperate to salvage what little remained of his reputation, attempted to contact Laura. The phone calls began early in the morning, followed by texts filled with empty apologies and pleas for forgiveness. Laura didn't respond. She had no intention of giving him the satisfaction of hearing her voice. She forwarded every message to her legal team, ensuring Aaron's attempts at manipulation were documented. Margaret, however, had no qualms about picking up the phone when her son called her. "You've made your bed, Aaron," she said coldly. "Now lie in it. And don't think for a second that I'll clean up your mess." Aaron's voice cracked on the other end. "You're my mother. How can you side with her over your own son?" Margaret's response was sharp. "I side with justice, Aaron. You betrayed a woman who loved you, who trusted you. You're not the man I raised. And until you can take responsibility for what you've done, you'll get no sympathy from me." As Margaret hung up, she turned to Laura, who was sitting across the room. "He's scared," she said with a satisfied nod. "Good. Let him feel what it's like to lose everything." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal battles. Margaret's carefully gathered evidence proved to be Aaron's undoing. The courts ruled in Laura's favor, restoring much of what Aaron had taken. The assets he couldn't return, because they had already been liquidated, were compensated through hefty fines and penalties. Aaron was left with nothing but mounting legal bills and a tarnished reputation. Bethany, sensing the noose tightening around her, attempted to cut a deal. She offered to testify against Aaron in exchange for leniency. But Margaret and Laura had anticipated this move. They ensured the evidence already painted Bethany as a willing accomplice, leaving her with little leverage. In the end, Bethany faced legal repercussions of her own, her career in ruins. For Laura, the victory was bittersweet. While she had reclaimed her financial stability, The emotional scars of Erin's betrayal remained. But Margaret was there every step of the way, offering unwavering support. The bond they had forged through their shared sense of justice became a source of strength for both women. One quiet afternoon, as they sat on Margaret's porch sipping tea, Margaret handed Laura an envelope. "There's one last thing," she said, her tone serious. "Something I've been holding on to for a while." Laura opened the envelope, her hands trembling slightly. Inside was a letter, written in Margaret's handwriting. It was dated shortly after Laura's accident. "If you're reading this, it means you've woken up," the letter began. "I prayed every day for this moment. I want you to know that no matter what happens, you have always been the daughter I never had. Erin's actions have broken my heart, but I won't let them break you. I promise to stand by you, to fight for you, and to help you rebuild. You are stronger than you know, and I believe in you." Tears streamed down Laura's face as she finished reading. "Margaret, I don't know what to say." Margaret reached over and squeezed her hand. "You don't have to say anything. Just promise me you'll keep moving forward. You've already proven how strong you are." With the legal battles behind her, Laura began to rebuild her life. She used the settlement funds to launch a non-profit organization aimed at helping women recover from financial and emotional abuse. Margaret became one of the organization's most vocal supporters, using her connections to secure funding and partnerships. Together, they turned Laura's pain into a force for good. As for Erin, his downfall was complete. His attempts to rebuild his life were met with constant reminders of his betrayal. Employers refused to hire him, friends distanced themselves, and even Bethany, once his partner in crime, wanted nothing to do with him. He was left to face the consequences of his actions alone. Years later, Laura stood on the stage of a packed auditorium, accepting an award for her non-profit's achievements. Margaret sat in the front row, beaming with pride. As Laura spoke about her journey, she glanced at Margaret, her voice filled with gratitude. "There was a time when I thought I had lost everything," Laura said. "But what I gained was far greater. A reminder of my own strength and the love of someone who believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. This award isn't just for me. It's for all the women who have been told they can't fight back. We can, and we will." The audience erupted into applause, a standing ovation that echoed through the hall. For Laura, it was more than just a moment of recognition. It was a testament to the power of resilience and the unexpected alliances that could change the course of a life. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story and tell us where you're watching from.